It is my very great pleasure to welcome all of you to the sixth edition of the Stage Struck Musical Theater Conference, Women and the American Musical Theater. So on behalf of the Acting Librarian of Congress, Robert Newland, and all of us in the music division, thank you for taking time out of your schedules to participate in this important conference, convening women in American musical theater. Whether you're joining us here in person or online, we are particularly grateful for the outstanding collaboration we have enjoyed with co-convener Dominic Broomfield McHugh of the University of Sheffield. And we want to thank conference committee members Stacy Wolf of Princeton University, Colleen Montgomery of Rowan University, and Kate Miller and Mark Horowitz of the music division. And can we have a round of applause for them? Thank you. You can probably imagine how hard they worked to put this together. And I trust that those of you who are here had an opportunity and enjoyed this afternoon's display. The display of musical treasures from the library's collections. How many of you saw it? What did you think? Yeah. Well, Mark and Kate and Janet behind Mark put it together, and I know that I knew that you were going to really enjoy it, and I'm so glad you got a chance to see it. For those of you who are tuning in online, maybe it'll induce you to make a trip here, because unfortunately we can't lend them out to you, and bring you here to plan a trip to dig into the collections. I know it's a thrill to know that so many of the scholars presenting during this conference are regulars in our reading room, and we wish for as many people as possible to experience the joy of discovery that you can get here in the library. I mean, think about it. We've got 28 million things that you could see. You could be here a long time. Have a great time learning from each other over these next few days. Thank you for being a part of our community and here at the Library of Congress. And now it's my really great pleasure and privilege to introduce you to our beloved colleague, Mark Horowitz, Senior Music Specialist and the library's truly legendary musical theater curator.
I'm going to cry now. Thank you, Sue. I'm Mark Horowitz of the Music Division. Welcome to those of you in the room and those of you on Zoom. We're thrilled to have you here. There are too many people for me to thank, to take the time to thank here right now, but there are some that have been too fundamental to the process for me not to mention. First and foremost is my colleague and co-chair, Kate Miller. And as Sue said, for those of you who just saw the show and tell, my colleague Janet McKinney, the two of them were responsible primarily for that display of treasures. Kate and I were part of a committee that included Stacy Wolf, Colleen Montgomery, Dominic Broomfield McHugh. Dominic founded Stage Struck some 11 years ago, and this is its sixth conference. Dominic first came to the library some 20 years ago, working on his dissertation on My Fair Lady. Since that time, he's literally changed musical theater research. He's written or edited some 12 books with Lord knows how many in the works. It's remarkable. He's also sent more of his students to do research here than any other professor I've dealt with, and remarkably, they have now sent their students. So I have 2 generations of researchers here thanks to Dominic, so thank you. Dom first approached us about hosting Stage Struck several years ago. We were sidetracked by many things, primarily a pandemic, but the time is now, And I will tell you, the primary reason I wanted us to host this conference is to spread the word about our extraordinary collections um, in musical theater. Among the dozens of collections we hold related to American musical theater are the papers of, and I'm going to start listing now, Jerome Kern, Irving Berlin, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Cole Porter, Dana Sweets, Lerner and Lowe, Leonard Bernstein, Oliver Smith, Peggy Clark, Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon, Tony Walton, Hal Prince, Mary Rogers, Howard Ashman, Jonathan Larson, Janine Tesori, and it hasn't been announced yet, but as a few weeks ago, Stephen Sondheim. And frankly, I don't understand why there aren't lines outside our reading room door every day. So I hope and encourage all of you to take advantage of these treasures that are yours. Final thanks to Sue Vita for agreeing to and underwriting this conference, and Assistant Chief Nick Brown for genuine and constant assistance. And now I have some news about this afternoon's schedule. Unfortunately, several of the panelists determined just a couple of days ago that they would be unable to participate for various reasons. They were all regretful and kind and wished us well in this adventure, and we appreciate their remote support. But I'm thrilled to report that Julie Tamer is indeed with us and will be the primary focus of this afternoon's discussion, and certainly hers is a life and career worthy of the increased focus. And actually, she's walking over here from Union Station as I speak. So she didn't want to take an Uber. Finally, some technical things. To those of you on Zoom, feel free to submit questions in the Q&A function. We'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible. We have cards for questions from the in-house audience. They're on the back table back there, and if you fill them out, I'll collect them about 3:50, and we'll bring them up and read from them then to ask Julie questions. And if presenters who are here, who will be presenting tomorrow and Friday, if you'll stay afterwards for about 5 minutes, we want to go over some of the tech stuff with you, about control your PowerPoints and that kind of thing. We anticipate ending a bit early today, probably around 4:45. And now, without further ado, Dominic Broomfield McHugh, founder of Stage Struck and a friend and guide to virtually everyone involved in musical theater research. So, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you so much, Mark. I wasn't at all nervous about this event until I was put in charge of playing videos. So it's going to be an interesting afternoon for all of us, I suspect. Right, here we go. Yay. See, I can do this. Clearly, Sue and Mark and I should have got together because I too wanted to begin with two votes of thanks. First of all, I wanted to thank the chief and the assistant chief of the music division, Mark and Kate and Janet, and all the members of staff of the library for their extraordinary efforts in bringing this event to fruition for us. It has taken Herculean energy to get the show on the road and keep it on the road, and it's frankly been humbling to witness their collective resolve to create this landmark gathering. They are remarkable public servants dedicated to one shared vision. So will you join me in thanking them? And second, I didn't want another moment to go by without again thanking my two academic co-conspirators for their insights and their wisdom, particularly their warmth and support, without whom I couldn't have done it. It's been a truly collaborative process in the good history of the musical, which is always collaborative. It's cost them far more than you know. They have been absolutely amazing. If two people can be one rock, then they have been my rock. So will you join me in thanking them again? Colleen Montgomery and Stacey Dunn. Now, why are we here? Well, it seems to me that in our roles as scholars and teachers, performers, artists, practitioners, critics, our one sacred duty is to tell the truth. It's what brings artists and scholars together, actually. It's our great bond. And sometimes the truth can be so overwhelming or even abstract that we might not feel that we know how to respond. For example, in 2024, the World Economic Forum released its Global Gender Gap Report, announcing the year when the world will achieve gender equality if it continues at its current rate. And that year is 2158. And since that's 133 years from now, you and I will not see how the story ends. But the report also cautions that it could take longer than 133 years, but it also offers hope we could get there sooner. And that's where we come in, I think. Because if gender is about power, then that power is upheld by a complicated nexus of relationships between economic and cultural domains across the globe, whether in astronomy or medicine or literature or agriculture. And the musical, with its history of both objectifying and empowering women, both on stage and off, and on screen and off, is part of that broader picture. So the least that I can do as a queer scholar is to create spaces in which we talk about it. Why are we here? Well, if our job is to seek wider and deeper truths, then this is the place to come. The Library of Congress is quite simply the home of truth. From the manuscripts of famous artworks and artists to traces of the everyday, the 181 million items in the library's collections preserve the journey of human frailty and strength in absolutely every form, allowing us better to understand the world around us. The music division, as we've heard, is blessed with particularly rich and amazing holdings that speak to our conference theme, some of which you will have seen earlier in that amazing display that's been alluded to and put together by Kate and Janet. They really have spent untold hours in finding new things that probably no one has seen until the day, since the day they were created. But if you'll indulge me for a few more minutes, since we need some walking over from Union Station time, I wanted to share a few things that I've discovered on my travels that help explain my resolve in creating a gathering on this important topic. So in November, I was invited by the New York Public Library, Library of Congress, to chair a panel discussion on the musical Gypsy ahead of the current panel. And in leafing through photographs from the time of the original production, I was particularly struck by this one, which I had seen before, but not for years and years, showing the remarkable artists at the head of the production team: Stein, Sondheim, Lawrence, Robbins, and in the center, Gypsy Rose Lee, wondering what they were up to. Surely nobody would deny their brilliance or the fact that they were at the heart of the work. But if Gypsy is unusual in revolving around the lives of women, it's striking that the image implies that the show is only the product of male creativity. I'm also struck that there are many empty seats in this image. So could not at least one photo have been taken also showing the assistant dance arranger, deputy costume designer, or the stage manager? There were women in the room, and they weren't only in performance roles. Sticking with Gypsy, on the 17th of July 1960, a young performer appeared on the TV show What's My Line?, in which panelists have to guess what a mystery guest's profession is. They managed to establish that she's a performer, that she's visible to the audience when performing, but is not a singer and does not play an instrument in the orchestra. In a moment of inspiration, Dorothy Kilgallen thinks she's got it. "Are you one of the strippers in Gypsy?" she asks. It was beyond the panel's comprehension that the performer could be a musical director, Liza Redfield, who took over as the regular musical director on Broadway of The Music Man, of all shows, in 1960, becoming the first woman to serve in that function as the resident musical director on a major Broadway production. It was big news when Redfield took over and was covered widely in the press, but that coverage reveals another uncomfortable truth. References in the Times article about her talk about her height, her appearance, what to call her, what she will wear when conducting, and even quote a male cast member expressing fear that the audience will be distracted from his performance if she's in the pit because she's so good looking. What this draws attention to is the fact that shattering the glass ceiling is not the only challenge. Women go on to be questioned and interrogated and too often undermined, even as they take positions of power. The amazing Maestro website also reminds us of a specific problem that I think we sometimes forget to talk about, namely that progress with any kind of equality is not linear. If we take a look at the 2 decades in the middle of the 20th century when canon formation really took hold, we can see that far fewer women were writing music on Broadway than in the period before. Indeed, in a way, the trend hasn't fully recovered from that time. What strikes me about this mid-century period, though, is first that there were several major women writing books and lyrics, and second, that a number of women were operating successfully as producers. So they had power and fiscal responsibility over productions, but somehow were rarely seen as composers, unless it was a revue where sometimes there were a few women who wrote 1 or 2 songs for revues on Broadway. Nor were these dynamics exclusive to Broadway at the moment. I'm working on a book about the MGM film The Bandwagon, and I've been struck over and over by traces in various archives of the treatment experienced by Nanette Fabray on the film. Before it was called The Bandwagon, studio documents all refer to the movie as Astaire Fabray Musical, showing that Broadway star Fabray was expected to be the lead opposite Fred Astaire, the veteran. But as the movie was written, filmed, and edited, her part was made secondary to that of Sid Charisse and gradually cut. For example, she filmed a number called Sweet Music with Oscar Levant. She clearly felt under pressure to perform well and turned up every day at 6:45 a.m., consistently 1 or more hours earlier than her co-stars. Several days were spent filming the number, and during the final shot, she twisted her ankle and had to be carried from the set, creating a situational disability for which there doesn't seem to have been a huge amount of support, because the following morning, she arrived at the studio again at 6:45 to start work on the next number, which was called Got a Brand New Suit. More days were spent filming this 6-minute number, then both numbers were cut after completion. And that left Fabray with a couple of group numbers and just one song in which she was the main performer, Louisiana Hayride. But this was an inappropriate number for her because it's written in African American vernacular English, drawing attention to the marginality or absence of black performers in the film. It does, however, give us the opportunity to be reminded of the performer who originated the song in the 1932 Broadway revue Flying Colors, Monette Moore. Her ascent to be the featured singer in a Dietz and Schwartz revue on Broadway was covered widely in the press, but almost her entire career was spent flipping between high-level performance and domestic service. She even appeared in a scene of the Judy Garland A Star Is Born that was then cut. So really the only trace of her in familiar culture are those words that she sang as a legacy on the lips of Nanette Fabray in The Bandwagon, doing justice to neither woman. But it's not all depressing in the archive. One final example comes from the library's Dana Suisse collection, found by Kate during her preparations for the conference exhibit. Suisse started work on a musical that seems to have been abandoned, but now at least we know about it, and his name was Stage Struck. It seems like a positive omen for our conference, which, as Mark said, is in its 6th iteration. I could never have dreamed in 2014, when I first convened a meeting under this title in my home city in the UK, that we'd still be going 11 years on. And it's been truly inspiring not only to work with the library, but to read all of the academic submissions and to give academic papers. We could have filled the program several times over with really brilliant work. So I'm grateful to everyone for coming, for sharing your work, your expertise, your experience, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Now, oh yeah, you can applaud. I'm in favor of applauding a wonderful week. Now, as Mark has alluded to In a moment, we're going to hear from my remarkable colleague, Dr. Colleen Montgomery, who will be interviewing one of the great artists of America. And to set the scene, here is a reel of some of her many career highlights, which is going to work beautifully. Here we go. Too much. Please welcome Tony, Emmy, and Drama Desk winner, Julie Taymor.
Thank you so much. It's a tremendous honor to have the opportunity to speak with our esteemed guest, Julie Taymor. She's an Academy Award nominated and Emmy and Tony winning director of theater, film, and opera. Her iconic stage and screen productions span everything from Broadway musicals to Shakespeare adaptations to productions of Mozart's work. Her imaginative and innovative approach to storytelling and design have earned her widespread acclaim. So it's a true privilege to have her here today. Please join me in thanking her again for so generously sharing her time. So I'll just start us off. I'd love it if you could trace your career trajectory for us a little bit and maybe tell us about what drew you to a career in the creative and performing arts and how you entered the field, and since this is a conference about musicals, maybe specifically how you came to the musical.
Well, I'm from outside of Boston, and when I was 10 or 11, I was in Boston Children's Theater. Played Cinderella, was in Tom Sawyer, played Aunt Polly. I wanted to play the stepsisters, but when you're 11 and you look like I did, I got relegated to the ingenue, pretty little. And so that was the beginning of knowing I was not at those ages ever going to play the kind of parts that I did a lot of acting. I was in Theater Workshop of Boston, did experimental theater in Arlington Street Church basement. Very political work, social work. I come from a family that my mother was the estate representative and yeah, I think we brought that down for the film. And was very active. My sister was an activist. If you've seen Across the Universe, it's based loosely on my sister, my brother, my family. But I was in the arts, and at age about 15, I always wanted to travel. So I would say my real through line of life is crossing cultures. And I firmly believe it, especially in a time where we're very divisive about our arts, about who can tell what story, about who has the right, and I can answer a lot to that if that gets to be a discussion today. But I was supported by my mother and father, who were fed up with my older brother and sister and said, yeah, go, go, go. So I went off to Sri Lanka and lived with the family, India, Sri Lanka, and as far away as I could. And then when I was in high school, well, as far as the musical things, I think with my best friend Conera Klein, who was Dutch, we would put on Peter Pan and all kinds of musicals in the backyard. My sister, again, I had to play the princesses. She got to play the witches. But, you know, I very early on was putting on shows, like probably everybody in this room in some way. And finally, I had been in this theater workshop in Boston where we did, they were very famous for a piece called Riot. You might have heard of it at the time, about, obviously, race issues. And then the company that I was in, and I was the youngest member, being 16, we did a show called Tribe, which was about the Native Americans, all kinds of tribes. And it was created by the company. But I felt at that time I needed discipline in study. So I graduated high school early, went to Paris, studied mime at the École de Mime Jacques Lecoq. And that's where I also, the mask part of my life, I started making masks. I've been a sculptor since I was a kid, not formally, just doing it. You know, here's the clay. And then when I went to Paris, there was a part of that studies is mask work, like there would be at Yale or would be many colleges. It was more for understanding how to transform your body as opposed to using masks in performance, which I later did. And then I went to Oberlin College after that and was in, just to go over the big things. I mean, it is 50 years of stuff. So to go, or you can read about it probably online, but it's, I think that the Oberlin part of my life, the most important part of it, I studied anthropology, folklore, mythology, anthropology. I studied under Margaret Mead for one semester and came back, Columbia. I acted in New York during that time. I mean, I was doing theater. I didn't study theater. That is the thing. I always did theater. I'm a practitioner. I learned by doing, by being, by traveling. And I did go one summer and work with Peter Schumann of the Bread and Puppet Theater in Vermont on his domestic resurrection circus at Goddard College. I was inside one of those 20-foot tall Vietnamese ladies. And at night I would sculpt, and Peter would come and advise me on my sculpture. And then I said, Peter, can I work with you all year round? Can I be part of your company? And he said, no, because I can see what you can do. And you shouldn't do that, which is follow one leader. You should travel. And you shouldn't stay too long with one master or one maestra. You should see and absorb. And that was an incredible advice, I think, and eventually then I got the Watson Traveling Fellowship after I finished Oberlin to travel to Eastern Europe, Indonesia, and Japan for a year, and then made it 4 years. So at Oberlin, I worked with Herbert Blau. Do you all know who Herbert Blau was? Lincoln Center Theater, and then Cal Arts. And we had a company. Bill Irwin was part of it, Sharon Ott, who then went off to Berkeley. And we worked on an original piece of work called The Donner Party, Its Crossing, for over a year. And this was the beginning of me understanding how to put plays together to be playmakers, meaning not from a pre-written script first, but from ideas, from stories, from, research materials. And that part of it, I had already been to Paris. I was very good physically as far as expressing ideas through my body and through imagery. So that became a big role. It went down to 7 people, I think, 8 people in the company. And we performed at the Performing Garage and this and that. And I think what happened after, well, I got the Watson Fellowship, the Thomas J. Watson Fellowship to travel. And that's when I went to the place where I was born. When everybody says, where are you from? Where were you born? And I go, well, my feet were born in Boston, but my being was born in Indonesia. That's the fire that I feel created, transformed me. Was living in Indonesia, went for 3 months, stayed 4 years. And the reason was because back then, which was 40 years ago, even more now, theater was, there's no such thing as musical theater. Everything is musical theater, right? I mean, theater is movement, music. You don't separate the forms. It's all part of it. Now, contemporary Indonesian theater in Java, no, that was like Western theater, where there'd be plays or you'd do Greek dramas. I worked in Java. The first thing I did was work with W.S. Rendra, who was a very renowned theater writer and director who was constantly being thrown in jail because it was a repressive regime. And the way he went around it is to do plays like Shakespeare did. He did Lysistrata. He did plays where he could tell these stories taken from all over, and the coding was clear. But he could not be put in jail. But if he was directly confronting the government in Indonesia at the time, it was dangerous. So he didn't, but he was not silenced. I saw that, age 21. You have to see that becomes part of who you are. You understand, okay, these are how artists do this. Shakespeare, he never went to Italy. He never went to Rome. He never went, but he would tell these stories, great stories, and everybody would go, huh, is that a metaphor? Huh, is that a mirror on our society? Or quietly? And so I very early had lessons like that, not necessarily by being in America, but by being in countries that had that happening to them, where the artists had to find ways and could entertain in those ways, could tell great stories, beautiful poetry. So I was there, and Rendra was the one who said, I was doing choreography for him, and his company in Yogyakarta was called Benkel Theater, which is theater workshop. And all the young kids of the neighborhood would get in trouble. Instead of putting them in reform schools or whatever, he said, come, let's do theater. And I, because of my background in movement, I got very involved in his company. He also wanted me to be his 7th wife, but that was not on the table. He was a Muslim, and that was perfectly okay. And I said, no, I'll be your choreographer for a moment. But he was creating new work, and then he said to me, why don't you here's a place to live. Why don't you create your own work? Now, at Oberlin, I did do production of Peer Gynt, and in Blau's company, what did we used to call it? I can't even remember now, but our company there, music and theater, it's combined. See, that I didn't really think about musicals. I thought about people sang in them, they acted, they moved. It was whole theater. Everything was used. And in Indonesia, the same. There was tons of singing songs, musicians in everything that Rendra did and other people did, and completely in the traditional theater, as you know. But in Java, I had a place to live, a workshop, and I created my first original show, which is not in the reel there. It was called Jalannya Salju, which is Way of Snow. And it was done, a trilogy, New York City, Java, Indonesia, and Eskimo. And it was about mental illness, which was part of my family history, and I wanted to deal with it, and how in this culture I could see how shamans were the psychiatrists of the soul, of the psychiatrists, and how they dealt with insanity. But also, because Indonesian, I could speak Indonesian, nobody was speaking English with me, I really wanted to do a show that would transcend cultural lines, language lines. So I could do a show full of music and different play with language, but not language to push the story, not script driven, which, as you can see, I had already been experienced in with Blau and theater workshop. And in the 70s, we had Gotowski, we had Peter Brook, we had a lot of theater that was pushing the boundaries of what plays, where did you start? Not that you didn't have a script come in later, but that scripts were also developed from improvisational work in the theater. So I started my first piece there, Jalannya Salju, Way of Snow. And then I went to Jakarta with it, and subsequently I performed it in New York at the, on Spring Street, the Arc Theater on Spring Street. But before that, I decided to stay in Indonesia because I got tremendous encouragement to start a theater company. And I got, after the Watson Foundation Fellowship, I got a Ford Foundation grant from not from the theater, but in Asian, Ford Foundation, the Asian program. And I then put together a group of Javanese, Balinese, Sundanese masked dancers, actors, singers, musicians. And we all lived together in Bali. And for a year, we worked together, and my practices and their practices, contemporary work from some of the Javanese performers, and then some of the traditional topeng, which is mask dancing. Again, I know this is musical theater, but it was musical theater. That is musical theater. And we created an original work called Tire, which is the curtain. And again, it was about crossing cultural boundaries. So that was what I did right before coming back and going to New York. And then you can, there's lots and lots of things. I'd love to get to the first musical. Do you have something you would like to ask me first?
Please, go ahead.
Well, because let me just think. In New York, I did the Haggadah with Liz Swados. Was her. She's a composer, and so that was at the Public Theater, and I think you can find that on PBS. Yeah, and we did it for 3 years until Joseph Papp said, "Burn the pyramids," because he had a falling out with Liz. But I designed the pyramid, so I didn't think that was so cool. So. He was an amazing man, but he was tough, and I also did design the sets for a show in the East Village, Black Elk Speaks. And I usually did the choreography. And then Bruce Dean brought me to ART to work with Andre Serban. He did the King Stag, and I was asked first to do just the costumes, but then I did the costumes, masks, puppets, and choreography. And by that time, I was going, I am getting antsy-pantsy here, got to direct my own things. Because I had already done it in Indonesia. But somehow, I quickly in New York realized you're put in a box very quickly and you don't get out of the box, which is something I've had to fight, not just being a woman in a box, but being other things in a box. So I started to think about what I wanted to do, what shows. And I did work with Jeffrey Horowitz, who just resigned from Theater for New Audience, who I would say is one of the greatest producers I've ever worked with. And I did Titus Andronicus, Taming of the Shrew, The Tempest, which then went on to do as you can see, films with Helen Mirren playing Prospera, and Anthony Hopkins, Titus. But that's not what we're here for. So let's go to my first musical, right? 1976 was the bicentennial. And I went into Barnes and Nobles and I saw this book that had a great cover that looked like a Hogarth kind of drawing, and it was called The Adventures of Jonathan Corncob, Loyal American Refugee. And it was a anonymous author who had been a loyalist, a Tory, and he had written this book about a kind of scamp, Jonathan Corncob, who all he wanted to do in 1776 was fuck a lot and make money. Sound familiar? and the book was magnificent. It was like Tom Jones. It was a Fielding's kind of book, and I felt that when we dealt with American history at that time, 1776, yes, the musical, but that there was this kind of reverence for American history and never getting to the truth underneath what was behind all of that. What was the revolution? And I found another book based on the real story. I went into research and found this material about a woman from Massachusetts named Deborah Sampson Gannett, who fought in the Revolution disguised as a man. This is a true story. She had been an indentured servant on a farm in western Massachusetts. In our version, she ran away because she heard Tom Paine's call, the comic The Cause, and she went off to Boston and enlisted. And Jonathan and she are this rocky love story, Mad Jack Corncob. And he's off on privateers. He's not gonna let George Washington fight George III one-on-one. They have time enough and privilege. We, the common folk, can't do that. So at that time, it felt like the perfect analogy of the American spirit, the altruist and the narcissist, selfish, blah, 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 right? And I went to American Place Theater. This was with Elliot Goldenthal doing the music, David Seesdorf, also known as David Chandler, the actor, co-writing the book. No, he wrote the book at the time. I sort of helped develop the story and me directing. And we went to Win Hanman at American Place Theater and said, we want to do this. And he said, I have somebody I want you to meet, Norman Lear. And Norman, he said, you've got 15 minutes. Norman's not really a theater producer, but he'll meet you. Now, this is very early. This is 1984. And I sat down with Norman for 15 minutes, and it lasted for an hour and a half or whatever. As you can see, I can talk. And he said, yes. So then we did this show, and I'm going to show you clips that nobody has seen, really. So it's bad footage. We really have to turn the lights off for this one and we'll move out of the way. But I think we have only like a few minutes of it. There is more somewhere. I need researchers. I need help. I actually do. When we looked at it again, La Mama we wanted to bring it back now because it felt very appropriate. And we couldn't find the score. We couldn't find the material. So we started looking and we found some footage. And we should look at it because it's early. Oh, I'll say one thing. It's the reason I got The Lion King. It's 1986 up in Ipswich, Massachusetts. Jonathan, from the anonymous novel, is from Squat Cock Farm in Virtue Falls. He's made Desire Slawbunk because the bundling board disappeared pregnant, and he's off. He's not going to stay there. He's off to make his living in Boston, and that's where he runs into Susanna Wills. That's the name for Deborah. Susanna Wills, who's just enlisted. And they are, Tracy Hepp, fighting through the whole thing. So you'll only get a feeling for a little. Todd Graff, who you might know, played Jonathan. Donna Bullock played Susanna, and 10 actors played 150 roles. First time I ever did this. So every single kind of puppet, mask, and the two leads are never masked. It's like the old-time classical theater, the young leads, and Desire Slawbunk, the third. So let's get off here.
I saw Liberties Taken one summer night in 1985 and knew that I was looking at something brand new that had never happened before in the American theater.
Oh, I fear my bosom will heave itself right out of my dress.
Sir! I shake my head at you!
A woman walked into a crowded room.
Do you remember
A soldier.
how and when and where we met?
Cloud with smoke and noise and men.
It's you!
A woman walked in, a soldier.
It's you I can't
A
forget.
man, is this Susanna Wilson?
You rode a horse of dapple gray, your hair was longer then. There was a man stood in your
A
way.
soldier.
He's in your way
A
again.
soldier. A soldier.
Your way again. You, sir! Thomas Hopkins! See, Tom Hopkins!
Yes?
Are you not the one with the parts of renown? The walking flesh stick of Cambridge Town?
Ah, we have reached the pinnacle of male-to-male flattery. No, sir, I am not said stick.
Oh, dear Lucy, it's been so long.
Sally, dear, I'm the Havoc now.
The Havoc.
Well, I was on a very pleasant run taking slaves to Jamaica when a British frigate boarded me and I became the oddfish, only to be overtaken by Spanish pirates.
Oh, dear.
Madam! Madam! That is no way to conduct a civilized war. Why the hell not?
Oh, saints preserve us!
Come tomorrow, morning finds us far away and a world apart. Then comes
So the song that you were just listening to is about 9 minute scene song, and it's something that I've always loved ever since we did that. That a song doesn't have to be the 3 minute obligatory, stanza, chorus, stanza, chorus, chorus, stanza, chorus, stanza. Yeah. And Elliot and David created this through, we started with the book, and then we took what we felt should be musicalized in the book, and they created this scene, which I don't know if we've ever done one quite like that again. It's not opera exactly, because opera obviously is sung through, and Les Mis is that balance between musical theater in a kind of traditional form of dialogue and then songs. But this was full of 30 outrageous forms of songs, choruses, solos, everything.
I think you're in the right room for people who might help you find more of this.
Yes.
I think lots of us.
As I was saying that, I went, yes, no, seriously. We're like going, where is it? What's in that big pile of shit over there?
I'd love to talk more about songwriting as we're talking about songs. I know that you co-wrote Burn It Blue, which was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Song from movie Frida, such a stunning visual spectacle. But music is also so central to the film, I think. And Elliot Goldenthal won the Oscar for his score. There's the tango scene, which I believe you choreographed.
We all did.
Okay.
It was a group. Salma Hayek and oh God, what's her name? Who played Tina Modotti?
Oh,
Ashley Judd.
Ashley Judd.
Yeah. I think that they have their own way of also making it happen.
I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about your songwriting process. There was also there were a few other performances. La Llorona was in the film.
Oh, there was a lot of songs. Elliot wrote a new song. He wrote a couple of songs, and they were translated into Spanish. But I was the director of that film, and that's not quite the same. And it's not a musical, but because Mexico is a musical country, of course there's going to be singing all the way through. We had Chavela Vargas singing. She played Death. She'd never been visibly seen on a film. She'd done songs for Pedro Almodovar, but I met her and asked her if she would play Death. That was very daunting to do. And she said yes, because she apparently had been a lover of Frida's. She's not Mexican, but it's her country. I also did a song in Lion King. I wrote the lyrics to Endless Night. And that wasn't something that was planned ahead of time. That was, I mean, I don't know if you know how the songs were done in Lion King, but there were 5 songs in the original movie. Elton John and Tim Rice wrote them, but Lebo M did all of the choral South African underbass of those songs, which to me were what made them great. Honestly, this is personal, but I've always felt it. And so when Tom Schumacher, having known about this show that you just saw, asked me to do this, when we did that musical, what was asked to do, Lion King, they didn't know how it would be done. I mean, they basically thought it couldn't be done. And Michael Eisner really wanted a Broadway musical. And I said, well, you only have 5 songs. And he says, here is this beautiful album called Rhythm of the Pride Lands, which is it's pretty much all of Lebo's music that was sung in various languages, South Africa, Zulu, Lesotho, there were the languages. So I didn't understand any of the lyrics, but I had the ability to take those songs and decide. La La Land became Shadowland. And I asked Lebo to write the lyrics to that. He didn't do a translation of his original. We wrote with Mark Mancina, they wrote lyrics that were appropriate to where I felt that song musically belonged in the show. And as I was creating Nala to be a much more formidable character, she needed that song when she left the homeland. It's nothing like the movie, as you know. The movie is 70 minutes. The women are non-existent, all of them. There was no Rafiki. And, who is going to bring the circle of life to life? So there's many reasons why Rafiki was transformed. I mean, it's a fun story, but we'll move on unless there's time later. But when we came to the moment of Simba having the dilemma of what to do, where he's stuck in the second act, I've heard this music, La La, I think it was called, not La La Land, La La, and it was so stunning, and there was nobody really to write it. So I knew what was needed, and I wrote it. Now this lyric writing has gone full blown, and the current thing I'm working on is a new musical with Elliot called The Grand Delusion. Very updated version of The Transposed Heads by Thomas Mann, which is a musical that wasn't in this thing as well. It was at Lincoln Center. But we threw out the original book and music, and the fact that it had been originally set in mythic India. Ours is set in contemporary New York, contemporary India, and then in complete mythological space. And we just did a reading of it a year ago in London. And we finally, 2 weeks ago, have an investor who will, now we're trying to find a theater. So we'll either do it in London, or we spoke to the Arena, they were interested. We just don't know what is happening, So I'm at that yucky stage that we're always in, which is, no, this is a good stage. We finally have the money, we don't have the theater. Which is usually the other way. We have that too. We had the theater, we didn't have the money, then we went to London, we got the money, and now we have to find the theater. So, but lyric writing, I wrote, except for 2 songs in the new one, the new musical, which is about 22 songs, I've written the lyrics. And it's great. I live with the composer, 40 years with Elliot. And we started on Liberty's Taking. We worked 5 years, and we weren't partners emotionally, and that did it. And that's when we became partners for life. And he does other movies. He's done 40 movies. He's done the ballet Othello for ABT, which has been around, and he's done. But in the theater, he and I work mostly, unless it's Spider-Man, which obviously that did well. So But I have to say, I think Spider-Man, it's sad because it was pretty great. If they had let us do the bloody work, it was on its way to being an astounding musical. But it's another thing for later talk because it is a big story that I haven't really told. Because I only wanted to tell it to people that I think it really would matter to, not as a salacious kind of, oh, what really happened kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm wondering, however much you're comfortable, but if you can speak more about just how generally you negotiate your creative vision as someone who's an artist with the kind of bottom line considerations of a production or clashing views with executives. How do you navigate that path?
Well, there's been the positive experiences and the extremely negative ones. In the theater, the most negative, of course, was Spider-Man. And that was because it was 3 sets of producers over 10 years. So the final people who came in, it was already created before they came, and they were not theater producers. They were money people, and they got scared. And so putting it shortly, then being a female, being the only one who'd done Broadway, nobody else in the whole team had done Broadway, they got scared. They didn't understand you don't tremble. And it was interesting just to watch how they like, choked. They choked. And lied a lot. But mostly, I had a great time with Disney. That was 100% positive experience, 100 or more percent from top down. So, and 27 years proves it all over the world, except in Antarctica. They don't want it. They don't need it. And it's about hot cultures. But I love it, and I still do it. And I just was in London working on the next version of it, which will be even an easier traveling version. I love my collaborators. I love that we were able to, 27 years ago, have a 90% Black cast and not talk about race. And that was something that I pushed through. And also what I worked very hard on was having the South Africans be an absolutely fundamental part, both artistically as creators with Lebo and others, but also always having 6 to 8 South Africans in it. And starting with Rafiki, we have had when we went to London, we had a wonderful actress, Josie, I don't remember her last name, but she's a well-known African English. And we went to South Africa with her. I hadn't been yet. And we met Sangomas, we met shamans, female shamans, and we went through that. But ultimately, we all felt that a South African singer, because the singing is extremely different than African American singing. First of all, there's no vibrato. Second of all, there's no elaboration. So all the great tradition here has no meaning for that music. And we're always fighting it. So I also, again, I don't get the unions. I feel like it's great that the audiences get this experience of South Africa as we go to Omaha and Nebraska and New York and, Miami or wherever. So I firmly believe that that is a great thing. So except in Japan, when we opened Lion King, the second company was Japan, not London. They were ready. They knew what I had done with the puppetry, and they respected it and understood it, because that is the highest form of puppetry to me, historically, is in Japan, the bunraku. So they had an all-Japanese cast. But what was fascinating was the Rafiki. I said, well, it's a shaman figure. And they knew what I was talking about. So the woman who played Rafiki in the original Japanese cast was Ainu. She was a shaman. And she was awesome. If you hear the album, it's great. So that was good. Negotiating Across the Universe, the movie musical, which I really, if you haven't seen it, I would love to do that in live theater, and I've been asked a couple of times, but not on a proscenium stage. It's too hard. And the trouble I had with Spider-Man was similar, which is too many scenes, scene changes take too long, too many stagehands. You get bogged down, and then you have to keep writing new script, which hurts the script, hurts the momentum. But Across the Universe, we had fights because they smelled the money, the Sony. They loved it when I showed them the first draft, but then they thought, oh, maybe we have, and this is pre-High School Musical, but they thought maybe we have High School Musical mentality. So let's get rid of the protests. Let's get rid of the, and I'm going to show you something in a second. I think I should from that. We want to get rid of the homosexuality. So the song sung by TV Carpio, Asian American, wonderful singer actress, she played Prudence. How many have seen Across the Universe? Okay, how many haven't? The have-nots have it. So, no, it was even. It was pretty even, just. Which is good. That's good. But it is gettable online. I mean, you can see it. But they wanted to call it All You Need Is Love. So right from the beginning, we had a bit of an argument because I said, no, I don't think that's true. But I think it's a good way to end the movie once you've gone through the experience. So right at the top, when I'm hired, I'm having an argument. So not a great beginning. I was work for hire. The story ideas were there, but I didn't want to do just everything in England. They were doing it with Americans, but the two writers who were magnificent, Ian LaFrennay and Ian and Dick Clement, they were older than I was, and they hadn't lived in that time during the Vietnam War in America, and they didn't. I watched my parents go through all of it, and the LSD, and the psychedelics, and my brother was not a draft dodger, but went through the hell of all of it. My sister was a radical. She was not a weatherman, but she was working with the people where the bomb went off in the West Village. So, and watching my parents deal with what it was like to live at that time was extraordinary. It's the only really biographical or close to my upbringing that I've ever done, really. It's the only one that I could say that. Everything else, Frida, Titus, everything, it's me and other cultures, but I find what I identify with like we all do. You know, I mean, how do men write women's stories? Come on, you know, it's starting right there. It's nonsense. Not that people who haven't had a voice shouldn't have gotten a voice. That's the good part of it all. But now, the next stage is authenticity of whoever the artist is. That's what I believe in. And that's what we felt about The Lion King. You know, there might be one or two things that are very close to some African masks because I got exhausted after 200 original designs, but everything is filtered through me as an artist, including the Disney look. So you'll recognize Mufasa and Timon and Scar in the Disney movie, but it's my style. So it's how I see sculpting and movement and all of that. So Across the Universe was difficult because near the end, they wanted to cut the March on Washington, the radical, you know, the fighting, the Vietnam War. They wanted, this says it all. When I was 16 in high school at Newton North, my best friend, Pamela Whittlesey, her sister was Prudence, said to me, I'm never having children. Having children is disgusting. It's so narcissistic. It's like putting out little carbon copies, remember carbon copies, of yourself. I'm never having children. She had 7, homeschooled. I had none. I put that line into Lucy's mouth, the young woman from Newton, she's from, it's not Newton, Brookline, Massachusetts. And she says that as she's walking home from school, high school. And that's her sentiment. And I said to them, Dick and Ian didn't write that, I wrote that. And I wrote a couple of other things for the females, like in Frida, I had to write with Salma for the female because Ed Norton couldn't do it. But so the studio says at that time, that makes her unlikable. I said, no, that's what 16-year-old girls feel. And that girl is going to be a leader. Not necessarily Jane Fonda, but let's just think about it. She's going to get involved in the movement. She's going to be a protester. She's going to be there, upsetting her mother, her close relatives, but she will be the one. You have to see it in that 16-year-old girl. So it was a battle. It went on and on and on. Ultimately, the film got released without the support of the studio. And the first weekend of selling it on DVDs, it made $30 million in a weekend on DVDs, and is a huge cult film. But people will say it was a failure. It was a failure because the studio got cold feet. And not because it wasn't popular, but because they thought that the teenage girls didn't need all that. And they were absolutely wrong. So let's show this. Okay, what you're going to see just the other night, I think, right? Saturday night or no, Monday night. Monday night. What are we, Wednesday? Okay. Tuesday night. When he said that we were going to do video, because you weren't going to get any video, I decided to show you one clip from Across the Universe, which is Let It Be. You know, it's all Beatles songs. But it's not Jukebox Musical. And the difference is this. I picked 33 songs, and you know, Ian and Dick, they liked what I chose. We created the book around the lyrics of the songs. They're all Beatles, but they tell the story. And that is different. Jukebox musicals, the music is kind of secondary to it. It might tell the story, but it doesn't really. This one, every song tells you, is part of the action. And here it's Let It Be, and you're going to see my audition, the very first audition for the woman and the boy who ended up singing it on film, and you'll see part of the film. And I thought this was an interesting piece to just show you. So, yeah, lights off and music up.
And in my all darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be.
You can't be in control of your own circumstances or the things that happen in the world. And when I hear those words in the song, Mother Mary comes to me, there will be an answer. Let it be, let it be. That gives me recompense and hope. I welcome confrontation. I don't expect it to be easy. But to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yes.
And we have been given a life.
This is the funeral of the young boy who gets killed in the Detroit riots, and it's such a contrast to everything that we've been doing in this movie. First of all, here is a strong dose of reality, which I think is what makes this film, for me, compelling.
The death of a child, the senseless death of a child, that's very hard. This has been an emotional day from the tip to now, and we're not finished yet.
Just let the rage, let it come out, the anger, the fury at what just went down, what that riot is and what happened at that point.
When I find myself in times of trouble,
You throw up images that are familiar to people, but the context is what makes people see them differently. All of a sudden, you're asking them not to take it for granted in a way that they're used to seeing on the 6 o'clock news. So you see it with fresh eyes, and therefore fresh mind and fresh heart. And hopefully, you change a little. You're transformed.
MVP.
My sentiments.
Wow.
I really want young people to see the passion in this movie and to see what fervor these characters invested themselves. I don't think there's anything that is a negative message in this film at all. But the events and people getting involved in those events did happen, and we need to be reminded of those times.
Needless to say, Carol was the first person to audition. I didn't know her. And all the other women who heard it through the door left. True.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful film, and rewatching it this week in preparation for our conversation, I was really struck by the way that it incorporates this kind of gritty realism and exploration of these social issues with this really fantastic storytelling and imagery. And I'm wondering how you balance the two, because those seem to me to be things that recur throughout your work, even when you're dealing with real people's real lives. Like with Gloria, you always have these surreal elements that punctuate the films, and I'm wondering kind of how you incorporate the two in your practice.
Well, the story tells me what to do. Like something like Frida, again, I was work for hire. But Miramax came to me. I'd done Titus, which we can talk about that. But Frida, I didn't want to do a biopic, you know? I mean, and I don't even like her paintings back then. I liked Diego Rivera's paintings, but then I really started to study. And what happened was Salma Hayek came. They didn't have a director. All the Mexicans had turned it down, the good Mexican male directors. So I was not the first one to be asked. They thought it was kitsch. You know, they would rather do something more like good movies like Amores Perros and gritty, more like Tarantino. We want our Mexican, you know, Scorsese. And Frida, for them, I mean, these were the male directors. I'm sure there would have been a great female director in Mexico, but they didn't ask. And Salma was on her way back from New York to LA, and I got a call saying, if you're interested, could Salma come and talk to you? Now, all I knew about Salma was she was absolutely stunning and had done soap operas and was sort of what she had done in, I forgot what movie that was, but the sex object in the movies. And she came in, and for about 45 minutes or so, she told me the history of Mexico at the time in the 20s, the 30s. She told me about Frida Kahlo, about Diego, about the painters, about the politics. She was not only brilliant, inspiring, and extremely knowledgeable. She'd been on the project for 8 years because they hadn't let her didn't want her to play the part. And at the end of it, it was more, I felt like I have to be this woman's midwife. You know, I felt like I've got to help her get this up. So she inspired me. Then I don't like movies about artists because often the artists are horrible people, Picasso and Rothko, and and they do these heinous things, and that's not what I want. I'll look at the paintings, thank you. I don't need to see them. But also, how the hell do we know what made them paint those things? Not true with Frida Kahlo. They were her diary. So it was the thing that really, I went, oh, I can see doing it, because she had a diary, and also there was a way into it. And then I thought, okay, my way will be to bring the paintings and make them come alive, which is there's 7 paintings that are fully handmade. There's no CGI. It's all done in front of you, mostly a little bit of animation, but we were able to do those paintings come alive. And that happened in the Glorias the same, because I was doing the 80 years of Gloria Steinem's life from her book, My Life on the Road. And it set me off into what are her dreams, her fantasy. She wanted to be a tap dancer. You know, it helped with how I was able to shape the story. So there's a whole Wizard of Oz sequence in The Glorious. You saw some images from that, I think, right? Yeah. So that's gettable online too. That's streamable. It's the last film. It came out in 2020 in Sundance, 1,000 people, 2 performances, and that was it because COVID hit the next month. So we were supposed to come out the following September before the election, and we were going to go on buses with Julianne Moore and Janelle Monáe and all these people with that film and with Gloria. And we didn't have to ultimately, thank you. But no one really saw the movie in movie theaters, ever. So it's very heartbreaking for me. But that does that crossover thing. Theater is all that, because theater isn't naturalistic, is it? But it doesn't mean you can't have different levels of acting style. So again, when you're doing Shakespeare, it's already heightened. And I started doing Shakespeare really early. I was in The Taming of the Shrew in Oberlin. I played Kate, and found my own way into that play. I love it. So what else?
How do you take a text, a centuries-old text like Titus Andronicus or like The Tempest, and transformatively turn it into something reimagined and something that helps us hear and see and experience the text anew while also remaining faithful to the story?
Yeah, I don't think that Shakespeare often needs to be totally updated. First of all, the language shouldn't be or doesn't need to be. I mean, you can do the stories in contemporary English, whatever, that's fine. But Shakespeare, and my favorite, many of my favorite Shakespeare movies are in Japanese. They're Kurosawa's Shakespeare's, which I absolutely adore. So he gets to the heart of what the story is. But I think that what Shakespeare shows us is, first of all, people say this, he's contemporary for all time, because he gets to the actual depth of the human condition. And it doesn't really change, sadly. Not really. I do think that in our culture in America, African Americans, women, there has been progress, but then there's always this stepping back, which we're in right now. But I think that the box is open, so hopefully it cannot be closed again, Pandora's box. But what you learn from Shakespeare, like Titus, when Jeffrey Horowitz said, read this play, I'd already done The Tempest with him, and I had done Shrew, and I don't know if I did another Shakespeare, but I did The Green Bird and other things. But I had never read a play that so shocked me. And at that time, I think it was about 96, it was before The Lion King. I think the Columbine, is that what it is? The murders, the Menendez brothers. There was a whole slew of violence in America that wasn't inner city for the first time. It was middle class, and people just were reeling from it. And when I read Titus, I think it's the greatest treatise on violence ever written. There's every single kind of violence in that play. There is noble violence, sacrifice from winning the war against the Goths. Then there's what Titus does to Tamara's children, which is he's going to sacrifice them because his religion says that in order for the spirits of his dead sons to go in peace, her children has to be sacrificed. She has the greatest line ever. O cruel, irreligious piety. Right? Do we think it's not the same right now? So the play, it has rape, it has lust, it has, just about honor killings were happening. I mean, they've been always happening. We as Americans weren't as familiar with it. The news was coming home. And this shocked me. I mean, Titus kills his own daughter because of her honor. It's like, and he's a good man. And at the time I said, okay, I remember saying, what if Titus were Colin Powell? you know, the great general that everybody wants to be president. And he says, no, we have to go, you know, do it, follow the rules, and it should be the firstborn in Rome, the firstborn son of the dead emperor. And even if he's horrific, Saturninus, that's who's it. And it starts this, you know, Titus is a great man, and that's what was so conflicting about this, because he was a great man who had done what we would call horrendous things. That was then they did it. But in our culture, the bad guys, either they're super evil and very easy to identify, or they're lower caste, class, whatever you want to say. It's through having to survive, to struggle, gangs, wars, that kind of thing. And Titus, so I felt, wow, that's what we need to do. And we did it right after, the first thing I did right after Lion King was Titus, because I got offered by Steven Spielberg to do a movie called The Cat in the Hat. And I went, uh-oh, going to be put in a box. I feel it coming, you know, the children's cartoon, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think I said it to him. I think I thought it loudly. Yeah, the cat's black. And I don't think that was on the table there. But I'm going to do Titus Andronicus. That's what I'm going to do after Lion King, because I want to work with one of the greatest writers of the English language, if not the greatest. And I want to work with the greatest actors. And I started with Al Pacino. We did 2 readings with Al, and he couldn't make up his mind. And so, yeah, Hopkins was second choice. No. But I was, you know, I grew up with Jeffrey Horowitz and doing American Shakespeare. I mean, really sort of trying to avoid just doing the British. But it was a total combination, the acting team there. Harry Lennox is genius as Aaron. He's American, great actor. And then we had Irish, Scottish, English. And believe me, the Welsh are not the English, says Anthony Fong. So
I'm sure Matthew Rhys would appreciate that.
And he would. Matthew Rhys is extraordinary.
He is wonderful.
I discovered him. He had never been it was his first, he'd just come to America.
Yes, wow. I'm wondering if you can talk a bit more. We've sort of danced around it, but you've been so successful in your career as a woman in a field that has historically been so dominated by men. And I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about the challenges that you faced or the opportunities that you see today, maybe how you mentor other people coming up now or create spaces in which women can thrive in the future.
I think it's happening. You know, for me, Ariana Minushkin, who was the director of Théâtre du Soleil, and she had done, when I was going to Indonesia, so that long ago, she was a great French director, had her own company, and they were very inspired, like Brooke was, of the Kathakali. She had done Twelfth Night. I saw it in Paris, or at her patisserie, which was an incredible workshop space outside of Paris, where you watch the actors get made up, and it came out of that 60s, 70s theater tradition. And she used the form, the physical form. This was right before I went to Indonesia. It was on the way that I saw her work. So she was a model. I didn't really have any female models in America in theater, I don't think, no. As far as being that, Danya Taymor is my niece, and she's up for her second Tony nomination, and she won the Tony last year for The Outsiders. When she graduated Duke, she came and was my assistant or PA or whatever on Spider-Man, so she got a great learning experience, tremendous learning experience, and then she was my assistant director on 3 shows. And then she had already been directing a little bit, but then she was no longer in that position. And that would be the most obvious mentorship, in a sense of she watched me do Grounded at the Public, she worked with me on Grounded, Dream at Theater for New Audience, so Shakespeare, a one-woman show of a contemporary drone story with Anne Hathaway, and then obviously Spider-Man. So she got a really good cross-theater style experience. But I think that there are women, I mean, it was interesting how long it took for women to get to Broadway, but I remember back then thinking Joanne Akalaitis and some of the other women, they don't want to do Broadway. They want to do the theater they wanted to do, and we always felt that the men were whores. that they would just give up whatever they were working on and just go to get the big thing, the money and all of that. I think it's true. I really do. I think that the women directors then were really serious about the kind of theater. Now I think it's changed. That's changed. If I've offended anybody, I'm really sorry. Not. But I'm just trying to be as straightforward about it, because now I think that women are encouraged and have been doing it. Still not, maybe not on an equal. It's hard. I'm still having a hard time. So, and I know that what I went through on Spider-Man had a lot to do with my gender. And believe me, Gloria Steinem talked to me about it, because we didn't know each other. She saw it. She wanted to do a march. She and a couple of the other very big female director-writers at the time, it was pretty evident. And I know because I had a lawsuit and got to read the discovery. So I saw it. I saw the misogyny in writing. And, you know, it's in film, it's still difficult. You know, you have Catherine Bigelow, who won the first woman to win the Academy Award. She did Detroit, the movie Detroit, which wasn't a success, and did nothing after that for a long time. So women know that you don't fail upwards. That only goes for one group of people. And it takes a lot longer. So it's those rules are still in quietly. They're still very much a part of it.
And it's all the more perilous to be put in a box than as a woman when you're only seen to be able to do one thing. It limits you even further.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get asked to do a lot of female biopics. You know, I just got another one. Look, I do Shakespeare. So if you go back, I don't have a feeling for that. I'd love to do women's stories. I think it's great. But if there's a great other story, that's fine for me too. And I think that's the problem. They naturally go, oh, this should have a woman director. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm wondering, you've worked across so many different media forms, and I'm wondering what your favorite things are about working in film or working in theater, working with opera, maybe some of the challenges of each, and how working across different media has just shaped your creative approach more broadly.
Well, as I said, I've been in theater for so long and had made little animated films in high school, but never. The first film I made was Fool's Fire for Lindsay Law at American Playhouse, which was, and you had asked me this question and I didn't answer it, was adapting Edgar Allan Poe short story and making a film out of it. And it's an hour film. And American Playhouse, again, this is what happens all the time. You get a thing and then the thing closes. I've been in that where the studio head leaves, the and you're left in the middle. But it was a highly theatrical, when I say that, a highly theatrical film. Has anybody seen Fool's Fire? It's not available. So it's about, it's one of his darkest short stories called Hot Frog, about a dwarf or little person, court jester, who's treated like he's a doll or a puppet really badly. And in the story, the court treats him, you know, he's the other. He's just treated terribly. And then another little woman is brought in as a gift to the king in a cage, Trippetta, very small actress. And he falls in love with her, but again, they're the toys. So the device was that the only humans in the film are Hot Frog and Trippetta. And all the other characters are huge, larger than life, so even bigger puppets. But foam latex, which meant they had moving mouths and eyes and were very, very dimensional. Tom Hewitt, you all know him. He played the king. If you want to look into this, there's stuff I think on the website. But it's findable. You know, there's great documentary footage, like a lot on that, making of that. But one of the scenes is the banquet hall, and in the style of the Sienese painters, it was the whole set was on a forced perspective, which you would do in the theater, but we did it in film. So scenically, I worked with Skip Mercier, who had done 6 of my shows, Juan Darien, which we have clips from as well. I don't know what time is, so you've got to, I don't know how much time. We're okay? Yeah. Okay. So, and I think, I don't know, do I only have one more that I haven't shown? Is that just Juan Darien?
I think so.
Yeah. But,
Oh no, sorry, there's two. There's also the Magic Flute.
oh, the Magic Flute. Well, that's opera. Is it? But, so it was really done theatrically. But I couldn't have done what I did on stage in the same way. Same with, with Across the Universe, which is a full-out $70 million movie. That's really 55 because a lot went to the Beatles' estate. But it's a full-out, big movie with Bono, Eddie Izzard, Salma. But nobody made any money. It was just shooting in Union Land, New York, and Newark. Newark was Vietnam. That worked. Helicopters, everything. But it had 5,000 people in it. It's the 1960s, 7 years. And so you have a lot of people to pay, and it was massive amount of scenes. I want to do it as live theater, definitely. But we have to get the Beatles rights, and that's not been easy. It's different now. But I want to do it in a, do you know what wraparound scene around? I want to do it where the audience is in the middle, and the whole thing is around them. It's a kind of theater that I really, really want to do. But you have to build it, so, you've got to get people who really want to create that. But at any rate, you will have something like Let It Be, which, as I said, on film is very realistic. I mean, the Detroit riots, by the way, just to show you about trouble, backing up here, the studio, when I got to see the cut that they made behind my back, that was cut. The entire Detroit riot was cut. For the funeral, it was the white person's funeral. This was a double funeral. It was Lucy, the lead young white woman. Her boyfriend had gone to Vietnam, comes back in a coffin. The other one you saw is the Detroit riot. And Jojo, who is one of the 6 main characters, it's his nephew, and he's there. And that's mostly what you saw was that side. But you did see where the family is in a green ceremony, the white family. And when I saw what they did, and they didn't win, but that's why the movie wasn't well released. I won the war and lost the release. I won it with a lot of support from major movie directors. Jonathan Demme. I mean, they all got behind me, but it was not a pleasant place to be. So that was cut, and the black voices singing Let It Be, you never saw the church. You heard the voices. The most racist, I mean, I have to tell you, I was like in South Africa doing a Lion King in South Africa, talking to California. So what time was I? 3 in the morning and whatever it was, going, I cannot believe we're fighting a war about a war that's fighting these issues. And I won because I had Paul McCartney loving. I saw this thing with Paul McCartney. That was exciting in London. I was in the scene where Lucy comes home, part of the family. I'm the little blonde girl who's like watching this go on at the table. And my sister, I was 11 or 12 during the Beatles thing. And so having Paul McCartney sitting next to me during one of the early in the songs, and he's singing under his breath and his head's going like that, I just like dying. But he loved the movie. So I had a lot of ammunition, so I actually was able to get that to release it. But once you do that battle, they don't necessarily believe in the movie in that way and didn't spend the money on the release. So I think Across the Universe, I've been told by all the other movie musicals that have come out since, the one on Queen, the one, the Elton John one, they all study what I've done. It's what we did with Across the Universe, because that has the perfect example of theater and film. And I think the song I Want You is one of the best examples of that. So do you remember in the wonderful movie that Twyla Tharp did of Hair? There was a great induction scene. So, of course, I'm looking at that and going, wow, well, we have an induction because the story is going to have Max inducted into the war after he's ripped up his draft card and all of that stuff. And I'm going, okay, that is part of the story you want. What song could it be? And thank God the Beatles wrote about everything. They had 200 songs. And so I think one of the versions, when I was looking for the right song for the scene, it was, you say yes, I say no, blah, 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 blah. And, the draft, the military comes to his door, and he goes, you say yes, I say no, but that's about as far as I could go. But then I saw again, I want you, the Uncle Sam sign. And it just seemed obvious. So we used a big armory in New York City, and we shot Max going up and into it. And then I had it's very theatrical. It's easy for me to do this one in theater because the big Uncle Sam, he comes alive and the big hand comes out. And then as Max goes in, I think we had about 30 dancers, and we made one mask of the army sergeant multiplied, and they're all singing. And it's a conveyor belt, right? It's on a conveyor belt, and he's stripped of his clothes and goes down. And then all the boys, and we shot this in Steiner Studios. The next part, we shot partly on location, and then in Steiner Studios, where they're doing that incredible dance that Danny Ezralo choreographed with the boxes coming over their heads. And finally, when we get to I want you so bad, it's driving me mad, that's all the lyrics there are. There are almost no lyrics to that song. It just is a phenomenal piece of music, and the lyrics keep changing their meaning. However you put the choreography or the imagery there, we end up in Vietnam with all these boys in their underwear carrying a giant Statue of Liberty with their boots, their army boots, smashing miniature palm trees. So we did that. We literally made a landscape of miniature palm trees and the boys carrying the Statue of Liberty. And of course, it's a commentary of America bringing liberty through the third world countries as it smashes. It's the irony of what we were doing in Vietnam. So as an artist, that's what we can do. We can make commentary, we can tell stories, we can show songs and images that then actually get to people in an incredibly, not indirect way, but direct way, because it's hitting their heart, not just their mind. You can read all the protests you want, read words, read it over and over again in the New York Times, Washington Post, whatever you read, hear it online. But when you feel it in the theater, especially in live theater, because it's happening at that moment. But even in a movie theater, if you have that experience, it goes very, very deep into you. And it's like everybody says, and I'm sure I would assume you've all seen The Lion King. Everybody says, I cried in the first 30 seconds. Why? It's not, Ben Brantley didn't like The Lion King, so I suffered through him for years and years. But he didn't understand the power of song and imagery. That it's absolutely not just equivalent to the script, but more so. I mean, it does take you to a whole nother level of immediacy and understanding. So back to what you said, that is a very theatrical setting of things in various different rooms and settings. And sometimes, in one song, I'll go from a street to running up the stairs, into a bedroom, onto a bus, into a high school auditorium. That was for, what was that one for? When Lucy is excited about her boyfriend coming home.
It won't be long.
It won't. She just saw it. I haven't seen it in a while. It won't be long. Yeah. And it's able to cover. That's hard to do in regular proscenium theater. That's why I'm very interested in this other combination of theater, that the audience is moving with the actors who are walking on the runway in front of the screens. The screen's open and you're in a new set. I think there's a real world to get away. The one Elliot and I are doing now will be proscenium, because we would like it to move easily. But eventually, on something like Across the Universe, I would see having to find a different way, because there's too many changes.
Mm-hmm. We're going to open it up to the audience in just a minute, but I read a few years ago that there were talks of maybe doing a sequel to Across the Universe.
I'd love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, get the producer to pay for it. Do it. Should we show the other two things? Why don't we just show them and then open it up? Who here got to see Juan Dariet? One person. Okay. So Elliot and I did Liberty's Taken, and then we worked on, again, Norman Lear came to he was a real benefactor. He gave us money. Lynn Austin of Music Theater Group said, what do you want to do? Elliot had read this Juan Darien. He had read this short story by Horacio Quiroga, an Uruguayan, the first magical realist before Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He had written this series of wonderful short stories, and Juan Darien is a short story about a jaguar cub that his parents are killed by the hunter, and a woman in the village on the edge of the jungle saves this jaguar, hides him, this little cub, even though the cub is the enemy of man. I mean, each of these stories are metaphors. So he is the enemy of man. She says it when the hunter with his rifle comes in and is looking because he followed the footprints to kill this enemy. He takes his rifle, he opens up the rebozo of the mother, and there is a human child. So through compassion, the child is transformed. And then the story, 7 pages, we made a full tale out of it. It's Juan Darien, A Carnival Mass, capital C, capital M. Elliot had read it in Spanish, and we decided to do it with no English. So this show is done at St. Clement's Church twice over a couple of years, went to Edinburgh Festival, Lille, Montreal, it toured San Francisco, and then it went back to Lincoln Center at the Vivian Beaumont on the full stage. We had, can you believe this, 5 or 6 Tony nominations for something not in English that's all done through puppetry, dance, and singing. It's all sung. There's almost, if there's any dialogue, it's like 2 or 3 lines. So here are pieces of that.
Excuse me, if people have questions for the Q&A, if you could fill out the cards at the back of the room, and I'll come collect them as soon as this is over. So, please.
Juan Darien was conceived as a show where puppetry would be the main vehicle for expressing the visual imagery, partly because it's a show about what it means to be human. Juan is represented by 4 different versions. He starts out as a little jaguar puppet. As he grows older, he becomes what we call a bunraku puppet, which is a Japanese technique where you have 3 puppeteers manipulating it. And on the death of his mother, he transforms into a human boy. And the reason I chose that place is because the experience of death is such an overwhelming experience that it seemed like the right moment to be expressive emotionally with facial expression and voice. That he's ready now to be considered a fully human being.
The collaboration was lovely because I'd write a piece of music and that would inspire her to create a certain mask, or she would create a mask and that would inspire me to write a certain piece of music.
So as they're going for the magic flute, so we can move along, I didn't explain that it actually is a Requiem Mass, and that most of the singing is in Latin. Elliot took the Thomas of Solano text and then put it into his music. And so you're hearing Dies Irae, you're hearing, because we felt that it was a veiled passion play. that the story of this child who is then burned alive on the fireworks because they fear that he is a jaguar in disguise. And in the burning, he transforms back into a jaguar. The little boy is burned alive. And it's an astounding story that probably reflects the Inquisition in that time when he wrote it, when Quiroga wrote it. So now you're going to see some clips from, how many of you seen The Magic Flute at the Met? And okay, I think that this was the first, I did one in the Maggio Musicale in Firenze in Florence. And that was the first time the Magic Flute, Die Zauberflöte, was done in German in Italy. Yeah, that was really something because the chorus would not memorize the German. They were like leading it. And Zubin Mehta was the conductor, and we did it there, and then not Peter Gelb, Joe Volpe brought it to, we did a whole big new version of it for the Met in 2004, and it's been there now. We had two versions, the German version, and then when Peter Gelb came on, I'd already been working on the English version, so there's the long version and the shorter. The long version has now been taken over, the German version with a new production by, Theatre Complicité, Simon McBurney. But the English version it's kind of like the Nutcracker. It happens pretty much every Christmas time. And that was the first live from Lincoln Center opera production.
How soft and sweet your magic tones, your song is entrancing. Music is the heart's tune, the birds are sing, the beasts are
In the flute, I directed it, but I also designed the costumes and the masks and puppets. So, and it requires, the puppetry is in there because the story requires it. There's birds and animals, you know. I don't foist that form on anything. It's whether that production requires it, asks for it.
So I think we have some questions from the audience, both here in the room and joining us on Zoom.
Okay, you ready? There's the quote, "Art is never finished, only abandoned." Are there particular works you've done that you'd like to revisit as time has given you a new perspective on them?
Liberty's Taken, obviously. It was abandoned. And we have a script 10 years later, and we still didn't finish it. But I think we could. We just have to decide if we want to spend, 3 more years, the time. All three of us are old, so we're not sure. Sorry. Is that how you want to do it? I mean, it's also, will there be people to support it? So that's one that I would like to revisit. I would like to do Across the Universe as theater. I have 7 screenplays that have not been produced yet. And one of them, a big one, my biggest project of all ever, is called White Tiger. And I was brought to Korea to work with CJ&M, which is a wonderful entertainment company, to create a new form of theater. And it's an incredible tale, again, inspired by, I asked the Koreans, well, what do you want me to direct? And they said, whatever you want. And I said, that's not the way I work. Tell me your stories. Tell me your folklore, your mythology. So for a week, incredible stories were told to me. And one of them was the origin of the female shaman. I won't spend the time now, but it was incredible. And it went in me. I was in Korea for a number of months. As Devlin was, we brought her over. It would be an international group of artists, Elliot and others. Pansori, you know, if you all know what Pansori is, it's the Korean female singing style that where a woman sings like an opera singer and Janis Joplin rolled into one, and they play all the parts. I love this. I saw this when I was at a summer arts thing. And then the president of Korea was ousted, the female president, because of her corrupt shaman. Well, that was very interesting. So then I knew no one would produce this as theater. It's just too wild, too big, too hard. So I have a film script of it. That's too original, I've been told. Really, that is what I'm getting now from Hollywood or anywhere. And even with our musical, The Grand Illusion, it's not like something else. I call it a comic demonic. And some people love that, like a few here, and some go, well, what is that? And I say, well, you have to come and see. You know what I mean? It's so that's frustrating. But I have a number of things that I will revisit, would like to revisit.
Do you see works that you think were influenced by your work? Or do you see that? Can you elaborate?
No. Let it be. I don't think, we all get inspired by sometimes there are direct copying, but mostly, let's just put it at inspiration. But I do see it. Or I see that couldn't have happened if they hadn't seen this work.
Okay. Your work is so extraordinarily visual. If you were asked to direct a radio play, how do you think you'd approach it?
I love working with actors. So I listen to Audible, and I'll try out the reader first. And often they're not good enough, but if you get a good one, and there's one guy who I've read 2 books that he has read, it's very exciting. I think we've seen some of the ones where they've done Dickens, and then they do it with a lot of actors. What I feel appealing about it is it will be a fast job, a really quick job. So I would do it. Because anything else that I do takes a lot of time, when they're original especially.
To what degree are you and your work motivated by politics and social issues?
Well, I think you got a sense of how I would do that. I think artists, the first thing to go in a repressive regime or fascist or however you want is kill the artists. So silence them. So I'm here because I will not be silenced, but I will do it through art. And when there's this expression, when all this stuff is gone, the art will remain. But also it is the one that can motivate and move. We know that. Music does it all the time. So as you can see, when I did Across the Universe, when we were in the Iraq War. And when we did the scene marching down, it was Dear Prudence, and they're marching down Fifth Avenue towards Washington Square Park, which is a repeat of an event in the 60s. It's supposed to be the 60s, but we let all of the people, if you wore your good 60s clothes, you could come out and be an extra and join. But my 6 young actors who didn't live in the 60s, they thought that they were in the real protest. They acted and had the emotions that they were there protesting America's invasion. So again, I think you can do it very profoundly by telling stories that aren't necessarily exact to the situation. And that's why I wanted to show you some of the Glorias. Gloria Steinem's whole life is amazing. She created Ms. Magazine with these other women. I hope you get to go and look at that film. Because when Bette Midler plays Bella Abzug. When I went up to Bette Midler to her apartment and to ask her to play it, she had read the script and she said, I don't know. There's not enough action, there's no rape, no this, no that. she's saying right to the point that if you're going to do a movie about women's struggles, there has to be the victims, and you want to see the victimization. And I said, no, Gloria didn't go through that. She still knew what was happening. She was in the line, she was in all of these different, all her whole life, talking circles. I said, we have to go to India, though. We have to do we shot that entire movie in Savannah, Georgia. Even New York was shot in Savannah, Georgia. It's incredible, like 70 locations. But then I said, we can't do the India part. And that's where she was inspired with the talking circles. When she was the same age, like me, when I graduated, she went to India. She's older than I am, but we went through the same kind of transformative experience by faraway travel to Asia. She was following what Gandhi was talking about. And we were in these villages with women in India, in Rajasthan, who when I let them improvise because we were talking about what was going on in the villages. And we created a talking circle. It's on film, you know, and the stuff in that movie, like you saw that was the Women's March. This is interesting. So when we wrote the script originally, it was going to end with, we presumed, Hillary Clinton being elected, that would be the result of the women's second, it's not the suffragette movement, it's the 60s. No one had done a movie on the second wave of feminism, so this was that. And of course, before we even started shooting, we were at Samantha Powers invited us to her apartment in New York with 60 or 70 female ambassadors from around the world with Gloria. And I said, okay, we watched election night and we shot it. And that was going to be, you know, the end of the movie. And as my team, I'm not shooting, I mean, I hired people to shoot it. We watched, well, really, if I were to create the visual image of this, the floor would have sagged. It would have sagged at all these women, beautiful clothes. They were wearing their country's clothes, a lot of them were. And there was one or two men in the room, but mostly it was for these women. Oh God, it was also Madeleine Albright was there. And anyway, it was incredible. And as the results were coming in. So what is this, 2016 or, yeah. As they're coming in, that's how long a movie takes to come out, 2020. But they're coming in, all the women each woman is going, I have to get back to my babysitter. My husband's at home. And you watched everything to do with what they knew that they were going to get for their country if Hillary had been president, fly away. So when we came to thinking about the end of the movie, well, first of all, you have to finish the script. So we were in prep to do this script. And I'm going, well, I can't show that as the end of the movie. That's totally depressing. So we said, all right, let's bring our team, the documentary filmmakers, and go to Washington. So we all went to Washington, and we shot the march, which you saw. So that's our footage and mixed with footage of the time. We shot Gloria up there. You know, it's documentary footage. It's the end of the movie. That's what you saw. And yeah, that was it. Oh, there's a scene in that movie where we're riding on the bus and all the crew is we shot the crew. You'll see me in it, you'll see Elliot, you'll see, Gloria's on it. We're all there. I didn't wear a pink pussy hat, whatever, but we were all there on the bus, and all the women on the crew were extremely excited to be on it. But that is the answer to that question. That I deal all the time with things about social issues and politics, but hopefully in a completely inspiring and entertaining way, because I'm an artist. That's what I want to do. I don't want to shove it down your face and say, blah, blah, blah. No, like that puppet. Blah, blah, blah. But you'll get it. You'll get it in Liberties Taken. You'll get a commentary, but done through history, stories from the past, legends.
Great. Kate, did you have questions from online?
Yes, we have a question from our Zoom audience. Someone asked, was there an Art Deco influence in the Magic Flute? And what art movements have you been influenced by?
No, I don't think there's an Art Deco. That's interesting. The 4 pieces of scenery, George Seepin did the sets, it is the kaleidoscopic triangle, circle, square. And it's more from Masonic imagery. We went back to Masonic imagery as part of the origins of the magic flute. What am I inspired by? Each story, like if you, Liberty's Taken was American folk art. It was a giant patchwork quilt that was up there outdoors, and each of the panels opened in the beginning and you saw aspects of the story. And then coming through that big quilt would be pop-up sets of taverns. It was all like the original folk art, American folk art. And obviously Africa influenced me and Asia influenced me in Lion King. So each project you'll find, the one I'm doing now will have both New York City and India as part of it. So you have to look for what tells the story. It comes from that, not foisting an image or a style on the story.
The Lion King is not a huge band, including kids and junior production and a school curriculum. What do you think about that? I think the question has to do with allowing Lion King to be done in schools in a different version. Is that?
Yeah, it's about how how the Lion King. I mean, the show itself is incredible, and now it is way beyond not only productions all over the place, but this 30-minute version, this 60-minute version, and a New York City public school approved curriculum where every single subject is taught through the Lion King. And
I know nothing about that. Yes. How do you teach math through the Lion King?
Yes, you can teach every single subject with school. I mean, I don't know today if that's the case anymore, but there is in New York City Board of Education a curriculum that is 100% built around the Lion King.
Great. I mean, I grew up in public schools, and the first show I ever did was Midsummer Night's Dream, and I played Hermia. Shakespeare, I started really young. There was tons of arts in my schools, and so I think it's horrible that they are. But if you're saying that it's used to teach other things and not just to be after school fun, keep people off the street, kids off the street, I think it's so important. And that's why I really love what Jeffrey Horowitz has done with Theater for New Audience. I mean, we did Titus Andronicus for the high schools, and it's rough, it's hard. My Midsummer Night's Dream, it's been used all over the place. That one is accessible if you haven't seen it. We shot the live performance, and it's really a good movie. Went to the Toronto Film Festival, but we shot it in 4 days. So I think it's great if it spawns anything. That's fine with me. I mean, I've seen a couple of pictures and little videos of what kids have done, and yeah, I think it's great.
This is the last question I have. Can you tell more about working with Disney, moving from the...
This is mine too.
Okay.
Disney by Henry. Yeah, I mean, I think thank you. I mean, well, also, thank you, colleague, so much. Thank you. It's just unbelievable, incredible. Yeah. Thank you. I was one of the conference planners, so thank you so much for being here. This was astonishing. It is incredible to hear you tell your story and know that along your journey, you made The Lion King on Broadway with Disney. I mean, where you came from and working with Blau and traveling around, it still just blows my mind that you did that. How did that work? How did you manage those guys? How were you able to take all that you had learned and all you were becoming as an artist a while ago? I mean, you were a young artist at the time, and work with this multinational corporation, amusement park, all the things that they were, and they were just moving to Broadway and taking over all of New York City. So how did you do that, and that show is your show. I mean, it's so incredible to see. Anyway, it's a long question, but
No,
I was amazed.
I think it's because the timing was perfect. They had done Beauty and the Beast, and the thing about Beauty and the Beast, as successful as it was a kind of direct from the movie to the stage. And the new head of Disney Theatrical was Tom Schumacher and Peter Schneider, mostly Tom. I mean, I really worked with Tom. And that wasn't theirs. You know, and as I said earlier, Tom knew world theater. He did the animated films, he knew the animated films, but he also understood world theater. So he knew where I was coming from. And they also didn't have a clue. They just couldn't figure it out. And oddly, people think that that animated film was really successful. It wasn't. No, it wasn't. It wasn't like one of their films now or anything. It literally was 70 minutes. It didn't have a second act. And doing the whole Simba discovery of himself story with the waterfall, all of that I made up. I actually didn't take the credit because I'm a woman. I'm classic female that way. I wouldn't do that now. But, you know, I created how to finish the story. But they know, I mean, Tom knows it. I guess it's going to be online and those people are pissed, but forget that this isn't privacy anymore. But at any rate, I made models. Oh, do you all know the story of what happened after the first reading?
I'm not sure most people know.
Do we have time for
Unless
this?
you've read a lot about Disney, you might not know this history.
Okay, so this is it. So we created the new book. We had the new songs. Richard Hudson had created beautiful models of the set, and I had made with Michael Curry 5 prototypes of Mufasa, Scar, the gazelles, I think. But anyway, Timon and Pumbaa. And at 890, the old Michael Bennett Studios, we did a singing reading, like a work through singing reading. This is probably the 3rd one, because the other ones were before visuals had been done. This time we're ready, we cast it, and you only have 2 weeks or less of rehearsal, maybe even a week. Now, for any of you who know what bunraku is, it takes 80 years to become a master puppeteer. So when you're asking an actor to pick up Timon, and you know that's a one-on-one, it's a different kind, it's hachioji, it's a different kind of puppetry, they can't master it. Nor the mask work, by the way. I mean, you just can't do it. Also, these were, for theater people, white costumes, not finished. That's what you wear. You wear the muslins. And we had, now get a load of who was in the room, Michael Eisner, who was on board with the idea. I had already shown him something that made him like it. Then at that time, it was Joe Roth and Michael Ovitz, the head of CAA, and Joe Roth. Yeah, there's someone laughing there who knows exactly what that means. They're there from the movie industry, from Hollywood, flown to New York to see this in a room in 890 Broadway, rehearsal room. It's smaller than this room, so they're very close to the performers who are going to just do demonstrations, not do the show, but demonstrate the form with the mask on the head. And I kind of, when I saw it, I thought, oh, the mask is a little oversized. You know, I did downsize it after that. It was just a little too big for the human face. But we did the show, and then we go into the show and tell, into a smaller room around a table, me and all these men, and the models. I'm wondering how much of this I should really go into. Okay, I'll try and be as nice as possible. Well, it's just the truth, whatever. But or we'll talk about it. I may be censoring something. I may.
It's up to you.
I don't know. Whatever you are going to record or put. But this is what happened.
You're free. At first it'll piss you off. First it'll piss somebody else off.
That you heard her say that, right? The truth will set you free. First it'll piss you off, and then it'll set you free. What? Oh, did he steal that from Gloria Steinem? And who did she steal it from? Have no idea. Probably made it up. Or some person said it to her. But what happened was, One person, and I'm not going to name names, that's how I'm going to get around this. One person went over to the box, theatrical box, and looked at the jungle, and there was an idea in the original production to have Jack in the Boxes painted like the floor was painted, that the grubs would pop, Jack in the Boxes, worms, grubs would, you push it and they open up and there'd be a big grub. Because what are you going to do with a little grub? I'm trying to solve this problem. You can't have a little grub on the stage, so I had Jack in the Boxes on a track going by. And this person looked into the thing and turned to me and he said, "What are boxes doing in the jungle?" And I turned to Tom Schumacher and he's like, okay. I mean, what you want to do is, what is a Borscht Belt Jewish comedian do as a Timon doing in a jungle? And then one of the other people in that group said, I don't think this will work because you can't have the principal characters wearing masks or having puppets or this and that. I can see having the multitudes. I mean, he didn't have any theater. He wasn't a theater person, so he's one of those. I can see maybe the crowds or the herds or whatever, but not the main parts. And I did speak up and I said, "Have you ever seen my work?" No. "Have you ever seen any Asian theater, any of these things?" No. And then Tom made another big face behind his hand, which is just shut up because, don't worry, in other words. Okay, so at the end of this, not believing in any of it being possible, I said to Michael Eisner, to them, you're asking how this worked, why it worked. I said, I will make 5 versions of each of the principal, or 4 versions of, or 3, anyway, a number of versions of each of the principal characters. Those 2 people cannot come. They're not in the theater. That's not about, this is not, they cannot come. Because the other thing that when you're that close, really, truly, you cannot, where do you look, at the mask or the face? There is a problem that close. So I said, we're going to do it in a theater. I was very nicely saying all this. Do it in a theater. It was a long time ago. And with a black box with lighting, and Michael has to sit, you all have to sit at least 10 rows away. For anybody in the first rows, you get spit in your face. It's not a very pleasant place to be in the front row of anything, unless you just love that. But get further back so you get some distance, and I need to finish the masks and costumes. So it'll cost you. It will cost the $50,000 to finish, print, do the colors. And then I had wonderful actors, and we did them, because I said, look, I have nothing to, if you don't want to have masks and puppets, it's my solution, but if you think it can be done like cats, we'll do makeup. But I have to say, they're much bigger animals. So, as I've done Commedia dell'arte, Greenbird, a lot of commedia, I said, okay, and I'll do the half masks. And if you look at the Lion King book, or you look at my book, my playing, Pride Rock on Broadway, you'll see one of the original designs of Zazu is with a mask. I think it's still in there, not the puppet. But for me, Zazu is about being small and flying. So that's my solution, was to do that. But I did it a la Commedia. Had each actor play it 3 different ways. And I made sure that they were all good, that they were viable ways, not just trying to make those look bad. No, they were viable. And I went up to Michael Eisner and I said, well, what do you think? He said, I think we should do your original concept. And I will tell you that though it's a risk, the bigger the risk, the bigger the payoff. And that's what we did. So I had the main guy behind it. There were some times where he would come in late or say, I don't remember what it was, but some of the story would change, and I would help with getting to where he needed it to be, but I really felt that Simba needed to go to a very dark place. That was my big addition, which is I studied these forms in college and early, the mythology, the hero's journey, all of that stuff. And I said, he doesn't earn going back to Pride Rock if he hasn't gone through the dark places. And they were behind that. Even if it's for 4-year-olds, they were behind it. They were, we had to show death on stage. The tears. I mean, what I thought was amazing is they let me do it through silks coming out of the lioness's face. And also letting us do it in 5 languages, that a number of the songs are not sung in English. This is revolutionary for audiences, but this was the first real Disney homemade. Now, have they done it again since? I don't know. That's up to you to decide. But I know for me, it was a tremendous, and still is, a tremendous working experience. And I love working with Tom, Peter, and Michael, who are the main Disney folks. I mean, Disney himself was a creator, a creative genius. So that you have to go back and say, what were you trying to do in the first place? But nobody knew we had the hit that we had, because they just didn't know how to do the show to begin with. And back then, in Minneapolis, where we opened the pre-Broadway tryout, there had been no Obama. And to sit in that audience with a mixed crowd, and children are seeing a black king on stage, it was very apparent that this was something different. And Disney doesn't talk about that. They don't. I mean, Hamilton, a big part of Hamilton was discussing that issue. No, it didn't. I don't think Disney found it to be necessarily a benefit to make that an issue. But I knew from my friends in the business and around that for white people, racist was not the issue. It was done well. You know, it is animals and this and that. But I knew that there would be the faces of the performers in those choral moments. And so I said, I'm going to want to cast a predominantly African-American cast for this. There will be places, but I want the singing style, and there was total support. So where you think there might not be, there wasn't an issue. I never had it in what you would classically think would be a freak out. Like what I went through on Across the Universe was worse, much worse. That was racist and sexist and everything. You saw the movie I want you to see, but it didn't get the support from the studio on the release, and Lion King totally has. So it's been good. It's been really good with them.
What did Michael Eisner and the Disney people say on opening night?
I don't remember, but I'm sure they were smiling. I'm sure they were happy. I mean, really, the opening night is Minneapolis, and what happened there was people were screaming so loud that we were shocked. You know, it was so, what? You know, it was, what is going on? And we couldn't do the show straight through. It was previews. And we had to stop the show when we couldn't get the, this is classic, why you do out-of-town tryouts, why it was very sad that Spider-Man did not go out of town and be able to finish our tech rehearsals. But here we were out and we couldn't get the Stampede set up in time. So Tom would come out on stage and say, "Aren't you the lucky ones?" to the audience. Lights would come up. And that's what previews are. So sit in your seats as we change over a scene that we can't do it fast enough. And in the daytimes, we're working on that. And so we added the scene in the in one, you know, in the front, where Mufasa and Zazu are crossing over, and it's an important, incredibly essential scene that got written because of the problem with tech, where Zazu is apologizing for having brought the kids to, you know, with the hyenas, and Mufasa pretends to say, "You're fired," and Zazu goes ballistic, and then Mufasa goes down on his knees and says, "I don't know what to do with him. I don't know what to do with my son." Most human moment in the show, and Zazu says, "I knew a young cub, who," basically he's saying, "I knew you, Mufasa, where you were just like Simba." And you get the bonding of those two. They get over there, and we're ready for the Stampede. You know, it's luck is the residue of design. I don't know what that expression means exactly. Somehow it feels right. But I think that's what's so beautiful about theater, is that you can, very different than film. You know, when you ask me what I like about theater, I love the immediacy of theater. I love that, you know, you can change it while you're doing it. Film is really, really hard in that sense. You know, a lot is done in the editing and the music at the end, but it's very expensive when you're on in a big movie. Like I've done a couple of them where you're having to know exactly what you're doing that day and quickly change, and you really can't go back and redo it. You don't really have the... I had a reshoot for Anthony Hopkins on Titus, and it was very difficult. It was my first feature film, and I had these major movie stars, but he got it. He understood why we had to reshoot, so we did it.
We've been the lucky ones today, and I hope you've been a revelation, and I can't tell you how grateful we are for sharing your career and life with us. And
Well, thank you. Yeah. Keep writing, keep talking, keep producing, right? We have to keep doing what we do. Don't let anything stop us, all right?